Penn State, I mean, what can I say? They handled SMU pretty thoroughly, 38-10. There's no need to overthink the room here. I was listening to a breakdown on this game, and they were breaking down like statistical profiles offensively, and I'm like, they got 2 pick sixes in the first half. Game over. That's it. SMU looked miserable, as I would if I were in that environment. Game over. Home field, weather, personnel, SMU had no shot in this game. Notice I did not say SMU didn't belong in the game. I said SMU had no shot in the game. It could be that you were where you were supposed to be, but you had no shot of winning. That is possible. I'll talk about that later. Penn State has a water slide to the semifinals. Remember someone said that? I believe it was me. And that's not breaking news. Anyone who looked at the bracket understood, wow, Penn State got a pretty favorable draw. I just said it out loud because they had me over on CBS doing some hits, and I said, what kind of idiot doesn't think this? That's rude. I'm sorry. If you didn't think it, you're not an idiot. I thought it was common sense that if you're the 6th seed, you lost your conference title game, and your draw is SMU and Boise, it gets no more favorable. Now, you could lose one of the games, and that's on you, but it gets no more favorable. So I got called disrespectful by quite a few people who deleted tweets yesterday about halftime of this game. But that's okay. I don't get that benefit, but that's okay. So then they're going to go play Boise, and I'm going to say the same thing later about that game. And if they lose it, it's on them, but I still think it is the most favorable draw out of any of these teams that Penn State had. But they still had to go win the game, and they did. And you know what? They won the game, and I'm looking at the stat categories on here. Penn State, I mean, if I were to tell you Friday, Drew Eiler's only going to throw for 127, that would be an uh-oh. If I were to tell you Tyler Warren is only going to have 33 receiving yards, I'm concerned about that. They're only going to have one explosive pass in the entire game. That's not good. And yet they're up 28-0 at the half anyway. So, SMU, should they have been here? That's all I heard people talk about yesterday. They talked about it in the broadcast. Should SMU have been here? Yeah, they should have been there. But, Josh, they got blown out. I know. I saw the game, just like you did. What's your point? Well, my point is if they got blown out, they shouldn't have been here. Since when? So, who would you put there in their place? Like, who's supposed to be there? Oh, by the way, were you on record as saying they shouldn't have been there before the game happened? Now, some of you were. As I said the other day, if you were on record as saying they put the wrong teams in before the tournament started, then I may disagree with you, and I do, but that's okay. I'll respect that. What I will not respect is you're silent when the field gets set, and you wait to watch the games happen, and then you say, wrong team was in. No, that's not how that works. SMU had happened to them what will continue to happen, and what has happened even in the 4-team era since the dawn of the playoff. They got blown out in the first round. That doesn't mean they weren't deserving of the spot. Well, they weren't one of the best teams, Josh. Well, are we putting best in? Are we putting most deserving? We'll get into that a little bit later on. I've got several thoughts on that. I mean, there's some really crooked logic being thrown around out there about this playoff right now. All I'm saying is you got to judge SMU fairly. Let me tell you how I look at him. You can look at him however you like. I look at SMU. I look at what Rhett Lashley's done. I do not judge them on the same scale as I judge Kirby and Georgia. And I'm going to tell you why. One of them's Georgia, and it's a powerhouse, and the other one's SMU. And when Rhett Lashley walked in, he had a G5 caliber roster on his hands. And to a great degree, he still does. This is their first year in the ACC, mind you. And did they have a favorable schedule? Of course they did. Of course. But here's the thing. Up until 5 minutes ago, having SMU on your schedule was part of what made your schedule favorable. Did we forget that? It's like all of a sudden they get in contention this year and you recalibrate the scale. What you should be saying is, dude, it's a miracle they were even in the conversation. Like, huge standing ovation for Rhett Lashley for even having the team there to begin with. It's wild that they're even in the conversation. That's a properly calibrated approach to judging SMU this year. But since they got sucked into the playoff vortex where there's no room for nuance, there's no room for logic-based thinking, it's just frauds, overrated, exposed. Like, what? is that really the way you want to live your life? Is that where you want to be when Jesus comes back? Calling SMU a fraud? I don't think so. Remember this. James Franklin was made for this format. We said this in the spring. I think everyone said in the spring and the summer and the fall, James Franklin and Penn State could benefit more from a 12-team playoff than anybody else out there, because there was no head coach and there was no program in recent history of college football that had been just on the outside looking in more consistently than James Franklin and Penn State. They were once again just on the outside looking in this year as it relates to the old model, but now we've got the new model. So they got in. Then they got a favorable draw. So not only does the new model benefit Penn State, it disproportionately benefits Penn State, and that's why I'm going to continue to say James Franklin's got immense pressure on himself in this playoff. It'd be one thing if they had Ohio State's draw, and they got Tennessee, and then they were going to go play Oregon, because I don't think anybody like me would be sitting there saying, boy, they got a water slide to the semifinal. But that's not their draw. Their draw is two teams they outclass physically. They outclassed Boise just as well as they outclassed SMU. Spoiler alert there. So that means you got to go win both those games. Like, Penn State's a failure this year if they're not at least in the semifinals. Final, whatever. I get mixed up with this. Quarterfinals, semifinals. Yeah, they got to be in the semifinals. Like, they got to make it there for this to have been a successful season. Also, remember this. They've won every kind of game now. They've won rock fights. They've won shootouts. They've had to run the ball. They've had to throw the ball. They've had to play defense. Defense has won them games. So a lot of times when we get to the end of the year, the team or teams that are left standing are the teams that have figured out the way to win multiple different styles of games. Penn State's done that. Doesn't guarantee anything, but Penn State's done that.